move on to the next presentation, we have a university presentation on innovation economy and the role of higher education institutions by Professor Rao Bhamidimarri, President, Institute of Advanced Research, the University for Innovation, Gujarat, India. Can we please have sir on stage?
Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I have a terrible task here. A conference that is running 48 minutes late. And a topic that I am addressing here was already touched upon by Mr. Ramdas. So it's not an easy task for me to grab your attention at this time. So I will try and see if I can make up some time. Time management is the most important thing. Doesn't matter what we do. Innovation, education, industry, and we have proven that we are terrible at it. The organizers, the chairs of sessions, we all have to learn how to manage our time. That is the most important thing. But I'm sure we learn. We learn from experience. Let me try and see how quickly I can share with you what it is, what I wanted to talk to you about. So there is a lot of talk of innovation lately. But what is this innovation? We need to be clear when we talk of innovation, entrepreneurship, industry. I will dismantle some of the things that Mr. Ramdas has said. And subsequently, the panel also talked about it. Let me tell you, there is no industry. Industry is not one discrete entity. People who make the sheet metal for air conditioning, it's an industry. People who have a machine shop and make parts for engines, and that's an industry. And then we have industry, of course, who make rockets, space stations. That's industry. So when we talk of industry, what industry are we talking about? So it is understanding the terminology, the language is very, very important. So let me perhaps tell you, innovation, of course, is the driving force. It's the driving force for sustained economic growth. You look at the example of Japan. The country was completely destroyed in the war. Within 20 years, it became an industry powerhouse. How did that happen? It is innovation. Innovation drove everything that happened in Japan. So let's perhaps talk about how it is we can capture this in industry, in the education system, in order to continue to add value to the economy. If we do not add value, we, in other words, fall back. We don't even stay still. If we continue to grow, the meaning of it is we are going backwards. So, the innovation requires ongoing thinking. There was reference to creativity, um, exploration, if you like, tinkering. And these are the words that capture, if you like, the concept of innovation, which is basically out of the box thinking. If you look at innovation that has happened after the Second War, particularly, before that it was all, if you like, land and labor economy. You dig the earth, get the minerals, use a lot of labor, and create value-added products. It is after the Second World War that the knowledge economy started to grow. But it happened not because just universities educated more and more graduates. Most of the innovation took place and continues to take place in industry. When I say industry that has the capacity for innovation in Nestle, innovation in Pfizer, innovation in Novartis, that's where the innovation has taken place and continues to take place. But what universities can do is accelerate that process by creating human capital. Human capital that is necessary to undertake that innovative processes in industry or business. This is one area where universities, educational institutions have been pretty poor at. Catalyzing innovation in service sector. In product-oriented industries, there is evidence that there is influence of higher education. But if you look at the service sector, it's much limited. So if you look at the service sector, where is the innovation coming from? It is coming from the big four consultancy firms, right? Ernst & Young, Deloitte, right? So the role of, perhaps it's useful to round this off, and that's the RAND, another consultancy, of course, right? It's not a university. So they basically captured what is innovation, how the steps in innovation are integrated. There is, of course, educational understanding of principles. There is research to take the knowledge forward, but then translating that knowledge into usable form, if you like. It used to happen through even education in 1930s, 40s, in British education system. All education included what was called an industry placement year. In the US, it was the co-op system. If you look at Europe, mainly influenced by Germany, progressed to Scandinavia and Netherlands, the technical education integration into university or theoretical education was well established. So it's nothing new that we are talking about, but why we are talking about this still is because we haven't cracked it. We haven't actually understood, we haven't achieved and we haven't created a blueprint for it. So, but innovation comes in all kinds of forms, right? There are problems we understand well, and there are problems that we don't know. We know the implications of the problem, but we can't define it. So this innovation, the role of innovation is different in different cases. And then there are need-driven innovations. There's crisis-driven innovation. COVID-19, fantastic example, right? How quickly the world managed to come up with the vaccines. And it was a crisis. So we had to, and we did. Ozone layer was a crisis. So we quickly generated new lines of products to minimize the damage to ozone layer. And we have been successful. So when we say innovation, of course, it is different. It's different kinds of innovation for different problems. It's important that we understand that. So if you look at this innovation and how these different kinds of innovation are playing a part in our life, they are semiconductors and advanced computer chips, fusion energy, right? That is the biggest problem we are facing, energy. So this is nothing new. We've been working on it for 70 years. But the amount of effort that is going into fusion energy has increased exponentially to a point where at least now the concept is proven. Then we have artificial intelligence. How do we, I'm not talking of chat CGT. This is of course application for diagnosis of dementia. So how do we actually use artificial intelligence, which is based on, of course, the knowledge already exists, accumulated knowledge. So the innovation, again, the three examples I just reflected, there are hundreds of them. They are all different. So again, we need to appreciate the fact that innovation is not one concept. It is different for different problems. So what can the universities or higher education institutes do? Now, I was fascinated by the discussion at the panel a few minutes ago. There is this sort of simplistic assumption that universities don't educate people well. Institutes don't educate people well. They are not good for jobs. That's not the objective of education. Education's objective is not to prepare students immediately to fit into a job. That's not the meaning of education to start with. What is important, of course, is how do we bridge that gap? How do we not create two different paths? One education, one profession, application. But it's important that we don't confuse the two. As I said earlier, industry is not one industry. Secondly, industry doesn't stay still. Today's industry will disappear in 2 years' time. So if I educate people just for today's industry, what will happen to those people in 2 years' time? So I educate people with abilities to continue to learn. That is the objective of education. So the simplistic concepts like, no, we should simply put students in industry so they learn what's happening in industry. But that what's happening in industry wouldn't exist in 2 years' time. technology continues to move. So industrial practice continues to change. So if I educate my young people today in industry with what's happening today, then I would have destroyed their lives. I have a responsibility to educate them for next 50 years of their life. So this sort of simplistic approaches do worry me. I understand, I appreciate why people jump to these conclusions and solutions, but they are not going to solve the problems, not only of today, but they won't solve the problems for tomorrow. Let me also tell you the universities are assumed by governments, by universities, unfortunately, that they are the drivers for innovation, innovative economy. That's not the case. It is true in exceptional cases. You look at MIT. MIT has generated 25,000 companies to date. Its annual revenues are over $3 trillion. Where will it put it? It will put it at number 6 in GDP of all countries. You're talking of one institute producing knowledge that is generating over $3 trillion of revenues. So that's a completely different example. And there are thousands of other universities who have done nothing to economy, other than, of course, giving basic education to some young people. So how do we actually crack this problem? I don't want to be too negative. We have made progress. We are continuing to make progress. Universities are beginning to learn how to engage with society, with industry. My goodness, it's pretty cold here. An industry also is beginning to look outwards. The reason is simple. Universities provide relatively cheaper labor. That's the reason why industry goes to university, not because of all these grandiose ideas that there is expertise sitting there and so on. Yes, there is expertise, but that expertise is much cheaper in a university compared to the expertise already resides in industry. And this is the value of time I'm talking about. If there is a PhD scientist sitting in a company, Intel, their time is far more expensive compared to a professor like me sitting in a university. That's the reason why they go to universities. It's simple business decision, but that's okay. That's okay. At least it's bringing universities and industry together. The universities also beginning to learn, as I said, generating knowledge and learning how to convert that knowledge into commercial concepts, monetization of that knowledge. They are beginning to learn. Very limited at this stage, but that is beginning to happen. So that's positive. So the IP, again, I must warn you, of all these patents, Korea produces most patents. Next is US, right? China has also come fairly far. If you look at the annual patents filed, the time taken for patents in many of the countries is too long. That's a problem. I spent 2.5 years in India building a university. And I found it takes 4 years there. Impossible. If you have a technology that you want to patent, in 4 years it's well out of date, well before you patent it. So the patenting time is very important. The other concept that has come up in recent years is joint industry university centers or institutes. And that's where good work takes place. MIT has got an entity called Sandbox. Sandbox is an innovation hothouse. Students, faculty, all their startups reside in Sandbox. In fact, I have a company myself based on an algorithm developed at Sandbox. It's that sort of interaction between industry and universities is beginning to bear fruit. Still limited, but it's happening. So there are examples for others to follow. At the same time, universities are beginning to spin out their research. And this is interesting. So university research is captured in IP, and that IP then is translated into a commercial concept, and a company is set up within the universities or outside the universities. There are many examples of those, particularly US. US has done most work in this area. There are still problems. The problems are, if I'm a professor, I invented something, I own the patent, and there is an attachment to myself. I set up a company and I hang on to it because it's my baby. But the problem is, I don't have that commercial mindset. I'm a researcher, right? I'm a teacher. So many spin-out companies are failing because of this sort of lack of commercial orientation of leadership. So, again, positive is there are many good things that are happening, but we need a lot more of it. Industry-university collaboration. Now, this is where I disagree with this panel. I disagree with Mr. Ramdas. It has to be very carefully done. Industries half-time, what it is called, the time scales, are very different to knowledge-driven economy. The sentiment is correct, what Mr. Ramdas has shared with us. But there are many loopholes in it. As I earlier said, the industry keeps moving on. It doesn't stay still. They can't, because they have to survive in a competitive environment. The universities continue to enhance knowledge, but the two pathways progress at two different speeds. And reconciling these two speeds is the biggest challenge we face. It's not that it's impossible, but if we don't recognize that, if we rush it, and if we think that we simply do what industry does in universities, then universities will fail, industry will not make progress over a period of time. So, the industry-university collaboration has to be a reversible process. It is, industry has to understand the importance of research-driven enhancement of knowledge. And the university has to understand that the knowledge that they are striving to develop has to be made useful to society, to industry, to economy. And that reconciliation process has to be achieved. It happens in top universities. Yeah? Stanford, MIT, Zurich, Utrecht, Cambridge, right? There are very few of them. Unfortunately, I can count on two hands in the world. And that's the reason why you see majority of the developments always root back to these top universities, right? That doesn't mean to say the universities and other universities do not have a part to play. The regional economy, SMEs, right? SMEs benefit from tech institutions, universities. And there, the knowledge enhancement required is much less because it is a supply chain economy rather than trend-setting economy. It's not a breakthrough economy. So the universities, institutions have a key role to play, but different institutions have a different role to play, which is essentially what I would like to emphasize. Okay. Yeah. So what is driving the collaboration? It's basically universities, league tables, ranking systems. So if I have a university, I want to be at the top. One of the mechanisms is making an impact. Impact on economy, impact on society, impact on industry has significant emphasis in these rankings, in addition to publications and so on. The two are not mutually exclusive. I can publish and I can make an impact. So that's something very important. So there are all kinds of facilitatory structures, tax incentives, and all kinds of mechanisms that are being used to enhance the interactions between industry and the university. But there are some challenges, of course. Let me skip these. There is a biggest problem. It's the absorptive capacity of the industry. I may have come up with some interesting technology or modification to technology, but most industries don't have that absorptive capacity. And there is a bottleneck here. And I have no solution to it. It's not easy to crack. Then there are, of course, all kinds of other issues here. You have low tech versus high tech. You got manufacturing versus services, urban versus rural. Urban attracts capital, urban attracts human capital, urban attracts money, whereas rural faces different kinds of challenges. So this sort of innovation economy meaning is different in different places. Then public sector driven. You have Fraunhofer institutes in Germany. There are 76 of them. Government driven. A lot of innovation comes through there. Or if you have private sector, as I referred to earlier, Pfizer, right? The vaccine, a good example. Many medicines, of course. So let me perhaps stop it, given the time. At the end of the day, this is the age-old quote from Einstein, right? We cannot solve the problems with the same thinking that created them, essentially, right? So this innovation has to continue to come up with new ways of thinking. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there.